What's going on? Wanted to pop in here and talk to you about the gap. Ooh, that sounded like my voice cracked. That's funny. The gap and the gain. So, Benjamin Hardy and Dan Sullivan wrote this book called The Gap and the Gain, and it was so stinking good. I just recently listened to it on Audible, and it's going to be one of those that I have to go back and re listen to, maybe a couple times. So, I'm having issues. I wanted to come on here and do a Facebook Live. My phone is giving me all sorts of issues, so my apologies. The whole thing, I got a new phone, and so now it's not letting me log in into Facebook, so it's a whole issue. I'm going to try to get it figured out. But for now, let's talk about the gap and the gain. Simply life changing, so I can't wait for you to hear about it. So good. So, what they talk about is Dan Sullivan's idea, and I'll tell you the book is kind of a business book. However, I think it just applies to life, absolutely. So, the gap and the gain. You're in the gap if you are thinking of your life, your current life situation, and where you want to be. You're looking at that ideal situation, like the very perfect situation that could ever be, and you're constantly comparing your progress to that of your ideal self and to like the perfect version, right? So you're never quite measuring up. You always feel like you fall short, like there's so much work to do because you're not at the ideal yet. And sometimes, at least for me, you're going to have to tell me if this happens to you, but the bar keeps moving. As soon as I progress, it like doesn't feel like it's good enough, and I keep setting the goal out further. The ideal gets better and better, and I'm further and further away from it. So it's really easy to fall into that trap. And so what Dan Sullivan said is stop measuring yourself against the ideal. The ideal might not be your ideal. It might not be what's right for you. Your ideal could be somebody who has 50 years of experience or 20 years of experience where you're here on day one or year one. Like your experience is not going to be the same as that person that's been doing it for 20 years, 30 years, 40 years. Or maybe you're just living in like Pollyanna land thinking everything is perfect and that you should totally be there and be able to do those things when it's just not realistic. Not everybody has the same skills, talents, abilities, right? So why are we measuring ourselves against this ideal version that might not ever be true? Why are we constantly comparing ourselves to that girl and like getting frustrated that we're not there, that we're not where we should be because we're not at the ideal place? It just leads to like so much despair and like beating up on yourself. And like I said, I feel like I've done this my whole life. So this book was really life-changing. So instead, he talked about the gain. To try to live your life in the gain. Always be focusing on what you're... I was going to say what you're gaining from this, but that's not true. Focus on what you gained. So every single day, what did you gain today? What did you learn today? What wins did you have today? What is it today compared to you yesterday? Or where are you today compared to you 1 year ago, 2 years ago, 5 years ago, 10 years ago, right? So compare you to yourself instead of comparing yourself to your ideal. So by comparing yourself to you yesterday, if you have a 1% increase, that's awesome. You're making changes. 1% increase might sound tiny, but over time it is epic and it can lead to just like amazing changes. But if we're comparing ourselves to our own journey and how we're doing, then it's like more significant. It's more powerful. It feels like, oh, I'm making progress. I'm doing this. Because so often we tend to forget our own progress. We tend to look at what everybody else is doing and how far along they are. You could be killing it, and still like set the bar out further, right? Like you were just getting close, you're doing awesome, you're totally kicking butt, and then you just keep moving it out further, like constantly moving the needle or moving the bar. Where is the joy in that? Where's the gratification in that? I don't know about you, but I have absolutely been focused on how to have more joy in my life and how to embrace like every single day and see what really lights me up. And this is part of it. This is absolutely part of it. Looking at the little everyday details and seeing where you can find more joy. And it's also like, okay, fine. For me, comparing myself to that ideal, I've done that forever and that feels like crap. So guess what? I don't want to do that anymore. So I'm going to be intentional about starting to compare myself to me yesterday. And then something that I saw was Dan Sullivan and says that what he does is every single night he gets on, or he has like a journal, and he writes down 3 wins for the day. What are 3 wins that you have today? And then once you write that down, if you don't feel like you have any wins, okay, what are 3 lessons you learned today? Either one, a win or a lesson. So you write that down, and then what are 3 wins you anticipate to have tomorrow? So write those down, and every single day you do it, and it's not a critical thing. It's constantly just like looking, reevaluating, seeing where you're at, and where you want to make changes and tweak and adjust. And he said so many times, like, he would be above and beyond where he thought he would be. He would be kicking butt, and he would just underestimate what he was able to do. And here's the thing, that dang to-do list we all have, or many of us have, that's like, I don't know, 50 million things on the list, right? And it constantly keeps going and going. Checking off 1 or 2 or 3 things on a list of 50 does not feel good. On a list of 25, it does not feel good. It does not feel like you accomplished anything. But checking off 3 things on a list of 3, that feels pretty badass, right? That feels pretty epic. It's like, oh, I'm doing something. I accomplished something. Bring it on. What is next? Don't put 4 things, which I did that on my first day. I just recently started trying to do this exercise. Still learning it. Still figuring it out. But only put 3 things. So the gap and the gain, quick recap. The gap is when you're comparing where you are right now to like your ideal self, or to somebody else, like the ideal situation. That's the gap. And it leads you feeling despair and upset about your progress, and often not recognizing your progress. The gain is looking at where you are today versus where you were yesterday, or where you are today versus a year ago or 5 years ago. So yourself today versus your previous self. So I would love to know in the comments if anybody else has done this, if anybody else has fallen into the gap. I said that like fall into the gap. Okay, yeah. Didn't mean to say that, but it happened. So we'll go with it. Just say me. If you've ever fallen into this trap of falling into the gap, you can say me, or you could say fall into the gap, because that's just funny, right? Yeah, either way, but I want to know if anybody else has fallen into this trap. I would absolutely recommend buying the book or listening to it on Audible. As I said, I listened to it on Audible, and I'll probably get the book too, because it was just that good. All right, let me know in the comments. I want to hear from you, and I will talk to you soon.